Well, now, Jeannie and I have talked about different things that might be of interest, and we have noticed that several times in recent history, students have really questioned just how precise you need to be when you're making stained glass. And here's a window that Jeannie's working on. She had to grind a lot in order to get all of these pieces to fit. And so we talk about precision and how you need to have things be a good fit, and they have to work well. And so the first thing we do is hand you a pair of scissors. The dough cut. This is one that's made for lead. This is one that's made for copper foil. And they chop out a little piece of the material so that you'll have rattle room in your window. Well, that doesn't sound very precise, does it? So anyhow, this has got a little bit of rattle room, but it's going to get tight as Jeannie foils it. So just how much is necessary. So we're going to change this piece out for this piece in the wedding ring pattern. And so what I want to do is I think I want to get a part of this line, and so I'm going to just draw around it. Now what I do I'm drawing right around the pattern piece, but now as I cut it out, I'm going to cut right on the inside of this line. Now by doing that, this cut line is the same as this outside edge of this piece of the pattern. And so now I'm going to you see how it comes off, and I've cut that piece of where the marker marked. So now I do a little bit of grinding on it, but it's only to keep it from having sharp edges, so that when you foil it, it won't cut you. But if you come over here with me, you'll be able to see that I've got a perfect, almost too tight fit. So then I've got to grind it off a little bit for safety, and I'm going to grind it a little more because I know it's going to expand more when we put foil on it. But once we get that in there, you see I've got a little bit of wiggle room, not so much that it slops around, but also enough so that it won't get too tight too fast.
Some students are worried when they have big gaps in their window. Sometimes a big gap to them is not a very worrisome gap to me. And so I just say, don't worry about it. Once it's foiled and once you get a little bit of solder in there, it'll be fine. But sometimes their gaps are bigger. And I have to be a mean teacher. And I have to say, you have to recut that piece. If it doesn't fit, it just doesn't fit. So actually, I'm kind of pleased with the amount of gap here. There just aren't very many, but as you can see, maybe one right there. And be sure to kind of rearrange your pieces, because sometimes you can fill in that gap and you don't have a problem.
Just by sliding it over,
Just by sliding it over, yeah. So try that before you do any grinding and get all worried about it. But they say, how precise do you have to be? And I say at the beginning, pretty precise. You cut it as close to the pattern as possible, and then you fit it as close as you can. Now, like David said at the beginning, some of these are a little bit tight, and once I start to foil, I might find, oh, they're getting tight. Especially when you get to the very last ones, you almost always have to do a little bit of grinding. That's okay. And so, but then once you've got it like this, we've got a little bit of wiggle room. I could foil around that and it'll still fit. But if we've got some that are too tight, then I know right away that it's going to, okay, like this one, I know that that is going to not fit when I foil it. And so I may as well just give it a little bit of a grind before I even start. But don't fret so much if you have a little bit of a gap here and there. I've had windows that have had bigger gaps. Hate to say it, but yes, I have gaps in my windows. And but you know what? If you look really close at Frank Lloyd, no, well, I haven't looked real close at Frank Lloyd Wright, but I have looked close at Lewis Comfort Tiffany, and you can tell that the pieces are not always, you know, some of the gaps are a little bit bigger after it's soldered, and I just kind of go, oh, even this wonderful artist, you know, he had gaps. So
well,
don't worry.
and it wasn't just all him. He had people working for him who were doing.
He had a crew. You bet.
Do you remember that girl that I told her she needed to grind as she was doing her?
As she cut?
Yeah.
Yes.
She was cutting them all and just laying the rough cut pieces right on the pattern. And I said, now you need to, at this point, cut them so that they fit in between the lines on your pattern.
One at a time. And yeah, David said at the beginning that I had to do a lot of grinding here. That's why. I had some students, and I wanted them to have first access to the grinder, and so I didn't want to bug them, and so I did cut a lot of them without grinding each piece as I went, and I paid.
Yeah.
I paid, because then later I spent a lot of time grinding.
Well, I wanted to say that girl who, by the way, was an art student in college. So I would have expected a little more precision from her. But she was cutting them out, and when she got done, there was every piece that she cut was at least 1/8 of an inch too big, and sometimes 1/4 of an inch too big. Mm-hmm. And the next week, she was camped out on the grinder, and it was miserable for her. She said, if I knew how difficult this was going to be, I would have been more careful when I was cutting.
And you have to be careful not to say, I told you so.
Yeah.
Well, and that's true. So one thing I was going to say, but I was listening to what you're saying, which is what I should have been doing. So,
No, come on, you'll come up with it.
oh, it'll come. So, oh, yes, it came. So what I was going to say is if there is 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, just too big, if it maybe your pattern moved a little bit and, anything could have happened, cut it. You don't have to grind that whole thing off. Even just a little teensy bit, if you get good enough with your cutting, just cut that piece off. And then you have less to grind. It's still going to fit. You're all good. And so, yes, be precise, but at the end, it is forgiving too.
And-
don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect.
And if you're not having fun with the process, then you're not doing it right. You should be having fun. The process of cutting the glass is fun, and foiling it is fun, and fitting it together, and
It's all
the creation process is so much fun.
Absolutely. So that's what we wanted to cover today is precision in putting together your stained glass window. So I'm glad you were here with us. Hope you learned a little bit of something. And when we learn something else, we'll let you know.